Right, so we are indeed continuing our sermon series called Vanishing Grace. And it's based off of a book of astonishingly the same title as Vanishing Grace. It's by Philip Yancey, and he's just looking at the world around us, and he's like, there just doesn't seem like there's a lot of good news around. It seems like everybody and everything is divided in the world, and they just don't know what to do. And he looks at us as these grace bearers, the people that have been showered with the grace of God in ourselves. Like we are the bearers of the resurrection of Jesus, and he's like, this is our opportunity to be able to bring good news into the world. That's actually like real good news. It's like cold, like a fresh breeze, right? Like a cool drink of water on a hot day. Like on a cold day, heated seats in your car. Oh my goodness, right? You know when it's really cold, like 70 degrees. You turn it on like that. That's you know, it's great. I'm not saying I was doing that yesterday, but I was doing it yesterday. It wasn't all the way on. It was like halfway, but it was good news of great joy, those heated seats on the 70-degree day. But that's what we're talking about. That we're being grace dispensers, right? Like grace dispensers, good news dispensers. And in order to talk about it today, we got to talk about Cain and Abel. Now, some of you may know that story. It's very early on in the Bible. You know, Adam and Eve had children. Cain and Abel were their first two children. Right there, this is at the beginning of Genesis, and then they kill each other. Not both of them, one of them, right? But that's what's like, oh man, what's going on here? So why are we talking about Cain and Abel? The reason why is what Jan read a little bit ago was from 1 John. And 1 John 3:16 is one of our best verses that we have in the Bible. It talks about what love looks like. We're going to get to that one in a little bit. But right before he talks about what love looks like, he contrasts it with this. So this is, I did twice there. The first John chapter 3, verse 12. He said, we should not be like Cain, who was the evil one, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Like so John is inviting us into the story of Cain and Abel so that we can compare and contrast what love and deeds of the evil one look like, right? So like that's doing those things, doing the work there. So what's up with the story of Cain and Abel? Well, whenever on Sunday mornings during the week, we kind of title the sermon and then I make a hero graphic, right? And I wanted the hero graphic to have Cain and Abel on it. Do you realize how hard it is to make a social media accepted post that people won't recoil at it as they look at it of Cain and Abel's story? It doesn't exist because it's all murderous and like clubs coming down. This is the only one I could find that was decent, and it's of stained glass that's a poor unfortunate soul down there in the bottom, right? In that stained glass. And you got like God's finger like wagging down at Cain right there. Like, because the story is kind of messed up. It's a story, and it's weird. And so what we do when we see weird stories, there's a couple things that we got to do. First off, when you see a weird story in the Bible, is to let it be weird, right? It's weird for a reason. And with this story, I think a lot of times we try to make the story of Cain and Abel answer a question that it's not telling you, right? Well, like you read the story of Cain and Abel, like, well, who was Cain's wife? It's beside the point. And some of you are like, yeah, who was Cain's? You're going to have an existential crisis here in a little bit. That's all right. We live on those here at Grace. But it's not, it's giving us a certain narrative for us to see and grasp the whole story that's built throughout the scriptures here. And so here's the story. Cain is a farmer. He's a farmer. He grows strawberries and tomatoes. He only likes the red fruits and red peppers. That's it, right? Like he grows all these things and it's going real good. Abel, his younger brother, grows livestock. And they both come and make a sacrifice to the Lord. Cain brings all the fruits of his labors up and brings it up before the Lord. And Abel does the same. Cain's is like, fruits and things like that, the strawberries, tomatoes, and red peppers. And then Abel brings like a lamb, up to sacrifice for the Lord. And this is what it says in Genesis chapter 4 about this story. And Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and of the fat portions, and the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. Cain is upset right here. And we're starting to see kind of what's going on here. Cain is very upset, and God kind of calls him out on this. That's in that stained glass. That's the wagging finger, right? Like that. So this is continuing on with the next verse. And the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well," and this is the key here, "sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it." Sin is right there at hand. It's right there. It's knocking on the door. You don't have to answer it, right? But it's there. He's angry, and God's saying, stop being angry. So, it's a defining moment, right? With the sin crouching at the door of Cain. He wants his sacrifice to be accepted. I don't know if he wants his sacrifice to be accepted. It seems like in the story, it was accepted. It just wasn't as good as Abel's. I think he wants his sacrifice. He wants himself to be almost venerated. He wants to be the best, right? He wants to be over his brother Abel, and so much so that when his own brother was more highly regarded, he ends up killing him out of anger. I think what's going on is that Cain has made that sacrifice the point of everything. He's made that article of worship the point of everything. And he's tried to raise it up and venerate it as long as I can practice in this way perfectly, then everything will be great, right? Like that, it's the center of his worship, and sin is crouching at his door. And he gave into it. So what are we talking about? I think what this says for us, and because John compares and contrasts it here, it's kind of something it's about us and the way we communicate good news. Because I think the way we communicate it is not through our pride, but it's through humbleness. Because what can happen is that we can kind of become prideful in how we worship and how we do things and what we believe and say and do, and it can lead to a desire for us to be venerated, or at least what I'm doing, to be worshiped by others, because we always need to be right. And you're like, worship by others? What do you mean by that? Well, whenever you set yourself up, it's like, you guys all need to be like me. This is all I do up here. Look at this. I put on this stuff. It's like, you guys need to be little carbon copies of me, right? I know you guys are all like, if I could just be more like Pastor Cris. I know it's the desires of all your hearts, right? Yeah. Like you guys know better than that. Especially the ones that really know me, they keep their distance, right? Like, ooh, it's a train wreck. But we feel this way. Like we want everything to kind of be venerated, that what we say and do and believe. Our wants, our beliefs, we want it to be kind of these things that are kind of held up. And we try to convince people to come our way. And in doing these things, we may not physically murder someone, but we do allow that hate to come in. We do allow that distrust to come in. We do allow that fracturing of community to come in, right? Like that's all that stuff is, and that's all built around that same genus of emotion as that anger, as that division, as all those things. And it's because we're trying to lift ourselves up. And John says that there's a better way. In fact, John says, do you want to know what love looks like? And as I know how amazing it's going to be when Elvis is here on Valentine's Day. He's gonna be showing you guys all what love looks like, right? But like John is like, hey, do you want to know what love looks like? And this is right after he talks about Cain. This is how we know what love is. That Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and that we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters, right? Like this is how we know what love is. That Jesus died and rose again for us. That's what we know is true here. You see, Jesus never worries about one-upping us. He never worries about trying to become the better one in the room. Instead, he lays down his life for us. It's not like Cain, who was willing to lay down someone else's life so he could be raised up. See the difference there? And Jesus even talks about this more. Like, I love to picture this because in the scripture readings today, it goes by so fast. But I love the story of Jesus that he walks into synagogue, and like Luke is like, he did that a lot. He went to synagogue a lot, you know. And he got up to read as he was off to do then, and he was handed the scroll of Isaiah. And then it says he turned to a certain place in Isaiah. Imagine this in your head. This is seen for a second. Like he's going in a scroll. It's not like pages like we have now. It was a scroll. So imagine someone, maybe a boomer, I don't know, trying to find something on a web page. Like I found this really good quote. Let me get to it. And you're like, they're over there like looking, like scroll, and like everyone's like, when's he gonna get to it? When's like this is how I picture how all this goes, right? And he gets to it. And he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who were oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Like, look, it's all, notice what it's doing. It's all like good news going out from there, right? Like just boom, out. He finds it, reads it, and rolls the scroll back up and hands it back to them, right? He comes and he frees us. He comes to die and rise again so that we might have good news, so that we might be forgiven. Liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind. And all of this is good news, and this is what Jesus does for us, for you. And he lays down his life for us so that we would know what love looks like. So we know what is going on with love. And this happened in my first service too. I don't know where here it is. The technology is against me today. So this is how we know what good news looks like. So the Spirit of God is indwelling into us. The Spirit of God is showing us love and grace and has filled us up to where we are filled to overflowing, and that overflow just spills out from all of us, filled with the good news, giving good news to the people around us. This is what the book is about. And so for this week, we are in section 2 of the book, not chapter 2, section 2. And there's 3 chapters in section 2, and it's called Pilgrims, Activists, and Artists. And what the author here, Philip Yancey, is doing is like, because we've been so filled with the grace of Jesus Christ, because we're filled to overflowing, we then go out and it looks like pilgrims, activists, and artists. And here's how he describes them. I loved these 3 chapters in the book. That's why we're talking about it. Pilgrims. It's a lot of Pilgrim's Progress, if you've ever read any of that, kind of an idea. But Pilgrims is not relying on ourselves, not trying to venerate ourselves, but realizing that we're on a journey of faith. Realizing that we have and there is around us brokenness and sin. Realizing that we all will fail, but Christ's forgiveness is there for us. Leaning on him and his grace, he continues to be with us in the midst of a broken world. and realizing that there are fellow travelers along the way that have different journeys than us, that are in different places than us in their faith life, that are in different things, and realizing that and not expecting them to be in the same place of the journey as you, dealing with them in humbleness so that we may point to Jesus and his death and resurrection, right? That's what a pilgrim is. Activist is like, in the Lutheran Church Missouri Center, we call good works ministries of mercy is what it's kind of called. It's kind of the official title of it. And when we do these ministries of mercy, like a lot of times it comes from these good places, but sometimes we can feel like we're above the people that we are serving. And what an activist does is realize the totality of the Christian story in us is that Christ has given us everything. And that when we are filled to overflowing, the good news just spills out around us. And so, because that's spilling out, it doesn't always look perfect. That sometimes what stops us from doing good things around us is that we want it to be like, I got to make sure it's all perfect. I got to make sure that this person I'm helping spends the money in the right place, right? Like that's just give, do, whatever. Like let the spilling of the Spirit from you affect those around you. Be an activist and point to Jesus in that thing. And then the artist. I love this one. Art has affected me on a profound level. Art has affected me. And the bad art, there is good art and there's bad art. Bad art is often revolves around the artist's own perfection of ideals. Like, have you ever watched one of those movies and you came away from it and was like, that felt a little preachy. I don't know if I want to see that one again. You know, because like bad art is like trying to show our perfection. Well, you know what bad art is also called? It's got a name. It's called propaganda. That's what it is, right? It's nothing but like preachiness, right? Now, I may step on a few toes. That's okay. I would describe a lot of Christian movies as propaganda, you know? That it's conveying the perfect idea and it's trying to get you to comply to it. But amazing art, incredible art is something that when you see it, sense it, hear it, taste it, touch it, whatever it is, that it sticks with you. And you can look at it and you can almost feel the soul of the artist, imperfection, like blaze across of panels or paints on walls, on ceilings. You can feel their imperfections laying across the floor or across the wall, crying out in a glimmer of hope, crying out for a light of redemption. You can feel it in poems and songs of pain that's wrapped in love. We're quickly approaching Valentine's Day. What are all those love songs about? But like lost love. Some of you like that country music stuff. That's what all that is, right? The problem is they've taken it too far. It's now propaganda. That's that stadium country. I'm not judging. But that you can see it, and we probably all have experienced art that even though it was 30 years ago when we saw it, it still enters into our consciousness every now and then. And it has changed our perspective in the world through songs and poems. Art can tell the truth in a drastic fashion that we may never fully comprehend. And we may not embody all of those. Some of you are like, those are some big words about art. I don't know if I'm going to go along with that. I'm a spreadsheet guy, you know? Some of you are like, what's a spreadsheet? Like that's an old person joke, by the way, but that's all right. And I know we don't all fit into these things. I'd like to believe that I'm an artist, but I create a lot of propaganda for social media here. And and activists and pilgrims. But as I was sitting there thinking about these, in the book, I encourage you to read the book because he's got story after story after story of people filling these roles. But I was thinking about it, I was like, man, Jesus fits into these roles. Like, you think about pilgrim and how Jesus would talk. I mean, he was kind of nomadic. He'd like walk around and talk to people. And notice he didn't like set himself on the temple steps and go, everyone, you got to come to me. Got to be like me. Got to do all these things, right? Like, that's what he did. He's like, he recognized people were on their journeys, so much so that the woman at the well, she walked away from that story of Jesus and she goes, he knew everything about me, and she thought that was good news. That's incredible. That's the sign of a pilgrim, right? And then and activist. You can always tell the sign of a good activist by how much, how did I put it here? Bristling he does to those in power, right? How he can make people, I mean, think about how the Pharisees, Sadducees, all those people, like they just couldn't stand Jesus, right? You can always tell a good activist by who he's bothering in power, right? He or she is bothering in power. And like, think about, and we could easily tell, like, because he was an advocate for those that were held down by the systems. Like lepers, those that were blind and see, those come to our mind easily. But the one that stands out to me the most, that Jesus and the church after him advocated for, is women. Women, I mean, think the women in Jesus' day. Like they bankrolled his ministry. You have to kind of read between the lines, but he bankrolled his ministry. They were always there and always around. And this is in a society that wouldn't be that far off of what's going on in Afghanistan and Iran today. Did you guys hear the big news about Afghanistan the last few weeks? They're not allowing girls to learn anymore? Good grief, right? That's not too far off from them. And yet, in all four of the Gospels, Jesus wasn't even a baby in all four of the Gospels. It's the ladies, the women, that are telling of the risen Lord Jesus. That's the most activist thing I've ever heard, right? Because it's these people that were held down. They're the ones that are proclaiming good news of great joy. And the fun thing, this is almost artist-like thing, is to think about if the story was to take place today in this area, in Port St. Lucie. People are like, where's that? Port St. Lucie. Who would be those women at the tomb? Not the individual people, but what group of people that you would go, there's no way that they would be there because they are X, Y, and Z. They would probably be there, right? That's a fun thing. And then he was an artist. Think about the parables. I mean, these parables have stuck with us and gives us fodder to teach over and over again. Last week we talked about the prodigal son. And that story ends so artfully because he allows it to end without an ending, right? And allows us and our feelings and emotions and past histories to glom onto the story and allow it to answer for ourselves. Does the older brother go into the party or not? Being able to be free and allow you to be able to make that decision in your own mind is like a hallmark of an amazing artist. Like in our book, Vanishing Grace is filled with examples of all of this. And the reason why all those examples are there, it's simply this. It's to give you encouragement that rather than venerating ourselves and our own worship patterns and how we always want things to be just so, and this is the truth and I'm standing on it, we realize that by the good news of Jesus, that Jesus has come in, showed you what true love is, that he laid down his life for us so that we could do one simple thing. And Meshach, he told me this didn't happen to him, so I'm a little disappointed. But you know when you're on the ice and it's up north, I know it doesn't happen here. You're on the ice and you're walking, and then all of a sudden you realize it's a little too slippery and you do that whole thing, right? And you don't bust something on the ice. And you do this, you go, right? Then that moment. all of Jesus laid down his life so that you could simply go, I'm okay. I'm okay. That's good news. That's good news. And if you can realize that good news for you and realize how full you are of it, and let someone else be able to go, I'm okay. That's being a pilgrim, an activist, and an artist, along with Jesus, because we have participated with him in freeing the captives, because we have been freed, and giving that rest of Jesus, because he's given us rest. And I think that's good news. And we'll end right there. Let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us and that you're with us. Lord, continue to give us those breaths. Give us that rest when life seems difficult. And Lord, give us eyes and the muscles and everything going forward and the strength to be able to give that rest to other people. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. So thank you so much for supporting, listening to all of that, and supporting things at Grace. I won't talk about this long because Meshach said it so well earlier. Because this little congregation decided to throw a few dollars at Meshach,